How do you reconcile with the reality that the Bible is written down, at least, by human beings, and that human beings are generally unreliable and also inclined to manipulate each other, especially when they're in control of large groups of people?
Well, if you were in charge of millions of people and trying to manipulate them, and you just kind of say stuff they liked, and you would say stuff that helped you do that manipulating, you know, that's his concept of like how we got the text. That's not even close to accurate.
So Stephen Meyer was on Joe Rogan, and he did a really good job. So if you don't know who Stephen Meyer is.
If I was going to define Meyer, I would just say he is the leading proponent of sort of the intelligent design movement.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen today is we're going to play some clips and then we're going to react. You know, play a clip and react, play a clip and react.
Do you want me to play that one?
Sure.
All right, let's play that one.
How do you reconcile with the reality that the Bible is written down, at least, by human beings, and that human beings are generally unreliable? At least in terms of 100% accuracy, and also inclined to manipulate each other, especially when they're in control of large groups of people, and also inclined to appease the instincts and the desires and needs of their followers. So they create texts that resonate with the people and develop a philosophy that resonates with the people. And if they say that it comes from God itself, who, especially if it resonates, especially if it makes sense, and maybe perhaps it is in some way from God because it is coming from this divine inspiration. But how do we know? When something's written down, and also we're translating it, right? We're translating it from, Aramaic, from ancient Hebrew, and it goes into Latin and Greek, and there's a lot going on there. And then eventually to English, and there's a lot of room for interpretation.
That's like the entire essence of our podcast. The land and the by word. Like, we believe in the word. He's like, how can you trust the word?
Well, and I think there's kind of two things that he was saying there. And he was saying, like, how can you trust the Bible if it was written by people because people want to manipulate or corruptible? And then the second one was, how can you trust it because it was passed down and translated? So it's kind of two different things, but those are things that you hear a lot of time. And I think we touch on, a lot.
Well, let's start with the first one.
Yeah. So
the first accusation.
Well, and so like for me, the answer to the first one is,
we work more on the second one. We work a lot on the translational and cultural issues.
Yeah. I think so. Well, and is that,
because I don't believe in the first one.
Are the translations reliable? So like, but I think the answer to the first one is like, well, have you read the biblical text compared to other texts? Have you read how unique the Old Testament is? I mean, people will try to tear it apart and be like, oh, it says this awful thing, and potentially out of context or not really understanding who it was written to and how God was using progressive revelation, I believe, at the time. But I would say compare it and see how unique it is and unique the stories are and how, like, we've talked about this before, like how mind-blowingly different Israel was and what they were being taught about God and who God was and how to interact with God and how to interact with each other. What would you say?
Well, I would just say regarding the origin of the text, it's definitely not normative Middle Eastern storytelling. Normally when you had the annals of the kings of Egypt or Assyria or Babylon, it was all glorification, zero introspection. It was like, Ramses is amazing. Ramses conquered stuff. Ramses, looks good. Ramses, like all the ladies like him. Like, he's so smart. You didn't have realistic, well, he really screwed up this war. And, let's be honest, he's kind of a fat, ugly kid, but
you're not going to get the story of David, is what you're saying.
Yeah. like, so, it's so, or even the story of Moses where he's like, I'm not a good speaker and I murdered somebody. And, like, even, and it goes on and on and on, you've got Gideon. The angel of the Lord is like, you brave warrior. And he's like hiding in a hole, from the bad guys. He's like, where's the brave warrior? I'm the one down in the hole hiding out. And who would tell a hero story like that? The guy who's supposed to be the hero, who eventually becomes the hero, was certainly not to start things out.
Is there like ever like a
or the
I mean, I
Samson
guess
story.
maybe Joseph is probably only the real hero.
Joseph and Daniel come off real good in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Really nothing bad is
I was
said
gonna say,
about
because
them.
even like Elijah, who does some
Elijah
amazing
and
stuff,
Elisha come off pretty good.
but Elijah still has
he has
his
his
moments
failure
of
moment.
fear.
Yeah, he has his failure moment. Elisha really doesn't. Elisha's kind of
Yeah.
a superhero in a way.
But most of the time, you're getting like a very human interpretation.
Yeah, you get the breakdowns and the weaknesses for sure. Okay, there's that. There's all sorts of embarrassing. You go flip over to the New Testament. There's all sorts of real embarrassing moments or odd things. The women finding the body, being honest about Peter's failures, his denial.
Just Peter in general. He's just saying dumb stuff all the time.
And then saying he's our leader, like he's the boss after Jesus went away. And you're like, ugh.
They're like, have you read the Gospels?
Yeah. There's plenty of stuff like that I don't think you would do if you were trying to just make something up that was self-aggrandizing. But the other thing that he has just a very, very foundational, fundamental misunderstanding regarding the origin of the text. Because his whole deal is, well, if you were in charge of millions of people and trying to manipulate them, and you just kind of say stuff they liked, and you would say stuff that helped you do that manipulating, that's his concept of like how we got the text. That's not even close to accurate. And you look at your gospel text, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these are written by people that the authorities probably want to kill and have tried to kill in the context of John, Mm-hmm. So these aren't the great manipulators of the multitudes. They're hiding out in caves or hanging out in prison islands, writing their memoirs. There's no great manipulation here. Mm-hmm. And
well, maybe the Old Testament. How would you couch that for the Old Testament?
I still don't believe the argument. It could be made better for certain parts of the Old Testament. So a lot of skeptical scholars will tell you that, for instance, big chunks of the Torah were revised, edited, and changed.
The documentary hypothesis.
Yeah, sort of during the Babylonian captivity, they went back and re-edited and changed some things. I don't tend to go there just because, as I've already said, I tend to assume the traditional answer is accurate until it's really disproven. And I'm not a super fan of the sort of German high critical stuff that arose about 100 years ago.
I mean, this is like, I don't know if this is tangential. I know you've said before, you're going to go with Moses as the author of
the Torah.
Of the Torah, yeah. And I've the more I've dug into some of that stuff, the more I'm there as well, where it's just like, it makes sense. Like if he was Egyptian royalty, he would have
understood government and understood literacy and been a writer.
Yep. All those things, and the ritualistic furniture that the of the Ark of the Covenant matches.
Yeah,
because that's what they knew. Again, it matches Egyptian furniture. So there's like all these context clues in those books. The amount of Egyptian loan words that are in those books. It makes sense that it's like it's highly. It
doesn't make sense that you would be in captivity in Babylon 500 years later, borrowing Egyptian words.
It seems to me the most plausible explanation.
And it's a funny explanation because you have like Moses writing his own death, saying like Moses was the most humble man that ever lived. And by the way, he was still virile at 120, so it makes for some funny writing, if you assume the self-authorship. But I at the end of the day, that's where I land.
I mean, well, John said that he raced to the tomb and got there first.
Yeah, he beat Peter to this. Yeah, and that one kind of makes sense. Like that one lends credibility to me because it feels like a little sibling rivalry, But he's like, oh yeah, I got there first, and I'll put this. Yeah. People reading this 2,000 years from now, sucker,
Yeah.
But regarding the Old Testament, and was it written to manipulate the masses? That whole thing. They killed Isaiah. They chopped him in half. So if it was written to manipulate, he didn't do a very good job of it. And you could kind of go on and on. The Psalms, how are they manipulative? They're the Psalm book. I don't know.
Well, I think that's a comment made a lot of times. People make comments about the Bible when they haven't read it. And they don't necessarily understand it.
Now, you could make an argument about 1st, 2nd Samuel and 1st, 2nd Kings that they are very, very pro House of David, not very pro Israelite, and not very pro House of Saul. There could be an argument made there that, there's a little bit of the victors writing the history going on in those books. I would still accept the inspiration of them. I could see where you would make that argument regarding those books. But by and large, not so much. I mean, and you use the civil biographies like, Esther or Ruth. Like, I don't really know how that manipulates the masses. The New Testament it's just simply not true at all. It's simply not true in the New Testament. They are running and hiding and being killed and slaughtered. And the idea that Constantine could gather up, this is what they argue, is that like, at Nicaea, Constantine swept up all the Bibles and adjusted them to his needs. It's preposterous. I mean, the Christians were dying in mass 10 years prior to this is when Diocletian is running around killing people like left and right, trying to get all the Bibles. They're dying to defend these things. And you really think just 10 years later, with a little bit of offer of like, I'll be friends with you if you'll be nice to me, give me all your Bibles so I can change them, that all the Christians, all the millions of them, are going to be like, here, take our Bibles and change them, and we'll get rid of all the fake ones, okay?
Well, we have manuscripts that date back before that.
Yeah, we do. And we have manuscripts from outside the Roman Empire as well.
Yeah.
So it's just preposterous that there was some manipulation done to somehow manipulate the masses. It's just simply not true. It's really, really horrifically bad history.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I guess we covered that one.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, click like and subscribe. It really helps us. And if you really enjoyed it, go on over to our website, thelandinthebible.com, and become a supporter. It helps us generate more content and gives you access to our full library of video and Bible study content.